You're listening to The Frankie Files, FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
Hot takes of a cult kid. Check out frankietees.substack.com for more information. Cults, coercion, and sexuality in society. These are the topics for the Frankie Files. I'm Frankie Tees, your host, and I'll continue to focus on my own family story as well as news and recovery info for those who've survived, especially the adult children of cults. New each Tuesday. See FrankieFilesPodcast.com for more. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 62 of Frankie Files Podcast. I'm Frankie Tees. Today we're going to be talking about One Taste, Nicole Daedone's orgasmic cult that taught orgasmic meditation, and it was also quite the business structure. I would like to start with an excerpt from an interview I did back at the beginning of this season, of season 2 of Frankie Files Podcast, with one of the members. Okay, so check this out. Let's talk about One Taste. It was a business structure, not just a cult that is a group of people living on property, but a business that had multiple locations with a patented technique under wellness. They're being invested in by Silicon Valley venture capitalists, serious money flow happening there. Give us an overview before we touch on the Mad Hatter part, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so One Taste was a health and wellness company. At least that was their business storefront. When I left in 2014, they were listed in a bunch of Inc. magazine lists, like I think the top 10 of female-owned companies, top 10 health and wellness, one of the fastest growing companies. And they taught a technique called orgasmic meditation, which had roots in other techniques from other sexuality groups that came before them, where a man stroked a woman's clitoris in a prescribed fashion to generate sensations in both of their bodies. And it was treated like a meditation. It was treated more spiritually than sexually. I know that sounds strange because we're talking about genitals, but that was kind of the main thing that the whole community organized around, and all of their classes were around teaching people essentially to feel more.
Right. And I remember viewing the TED Talk Nicole Daedone, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, did. Mm-hmm. And she presented this concept pretty much scientifically and unabashedly, I might add. Okay, so that was Rawan Mipagala letting us know what the structure of the place was like, how they got enticed, and what went on. Hear the full interview, link in show notes. The recent indictment is news of the founder, Nicole Daedone, for her Northern California cult / sex cure / scam organization. It's a lot. And we're going to use this Guardian information article as a source from June 6, 2023. Headline: U.S. founder of orgasmic meditation startup indicted on forced labor charges. Nicole Daedone of One Taste accused, along with the ex-head of sales, Rachel Cherwitz, of running years-long cult-like conspiracy. The founder of One Taste, a sexual wellness company that claims to teach orgasmic meditation, has been charged with running a cult-like conspiracy involving forced labor, federal prosecutors said on Tuesday. Nicole Daedone, the founder who served as chief executive until 2017, and Rachel Cherwitz, the company's former head of sales, were accused of inducing volunteers, contractors, and employees to incur debt to take courses that they claimed would heal sexual trauma and dysfunction. The defendants advertised their company as being able to help individuals recover from past trauma, said Michael Driscoll, the FBI assistant director in charge. In reality, they allegedly targeted their victims in order to manipulate them not only into debt, but to limit their independence and create a reliance on One Taste for basic needs. Prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office said the defendants also subjected One Taste members to surveillance in communal homes, instructed them to engage in sex acts for freedom and enlightenment, and failed to pay promised wages. Daedone and Sherwood's year-long scheme subjected members to economic, social, emotional, and psychological abuse, indoctrination, and intimidation, the U.S. Attorney's Office said in a statement announcing the charges. Under the guise of empowerment and wellness, the defendants are alleged to have sought complete control over their employees' lives, including by driving them into debt and directing them to perform sexual acts, also withholding wages, said Breon Peace, the U.S. Attorney. The pair intentionally recruited people who had experienced prior trauma. The U.S. Attorney's Office said in a statement, claimed One Taste's courses, which could cost up to tens of thousands of dollars, would heal them. Those who couldn't afford One Taste were induced by Daedone and Sherwood to incur debt, and the executives sometimes helped new members open credit cards to pay for the courses, the statement said. Daedone and Sherwood are also accused of recruiting and grooming members to engage in sexual acts with One Taste's current and prospective investors, clients, employees, and beneficiaries for the financial benefit. Daedone, 56, is at large, while Sherwood, 43, was arrested on Tuesday and is expected to appear in a California federal court. They both face a maximum of 20 years in prison if convicted. Founded in 2004, California-based One Taste was the subject of last year's Netflix documentary Orgasm, Inc., which followed its rise and the emergence of disturbing allegations from members. The company was initially hailed for its women-centered approach, but after 2018, a report from Bloomberg in which former members claimed One Taste led them to sexual servitude and five-figure debts, the FBI began an investigation. New York Post, June 13, 2023, alleged orgasm cult founder freed on $1 million bond. Judge warns her she's being watched. The woman accused of running a wellness company that doubled as an orgasm cult was sprung on a $1 million bond Tuesday, but a judge warns her that she's being watched while free. Nicole, Daedone, founder of One Taste, which promoted orgasmic meditation for women, pleaded not guilty to allegations that she coerced and groomed members into having sex with investors and clients for more than a decade. Daedone said little during the proceedings, sitting bolt upright in her chair, offering one or two word answers when U.S. Federal Magistrate Judge Lois Bloom addressed her. Her friend and former colleague at One Taste, Marcus Ratnathicum, secured her release by putting up his $2 million property in Fort Bragg, California as collateral. But even as Daedone walked free, Bloom starkly warned her to watch her step. "You're under a microscope," Bloom told the 56-year-old defendant. "You should consider yourself being watched." Federal prosecutors have said Daedone and the company's former head of sales, Rachel Cherwitz, led the business like a cult. The duo allegedly recruited those who endured prior trauma with claims that they could fix their victims' sexual dysfunction. But the pair actually forced members and employees into debt and subjected them to economic, sexual, emotional, and psychological abuse, as well as surveillance, indoctrination, and intimidation, to get them to work for free, prosecutors said. They allegedly made members live in communal homes and demanded they engage in uncomfortable and repulsive sex acts, claiming this was the path to freedom and enlightenment. If the members balked at the creepy cultish orders, the pair shamed, humiliated, and retaliated against them, prosecutors said. When asked Tuesday if she had a public statement, Daedone just shook her head and smiled. And then they have a picture of Orgasm, Inc., the story of One Taste, which is on Netflix. But her lawyer, Julia Gatto, said outside the courthouse that her client is not guilty of the sins prosecutors have laid on her. Nicole Daedone is a ceiling-shattering feminist entrepreneur who built and grew a company like no other, supporting and embracing female sexuality, female worth, and female empowerment, Gatto said. Continuing with the New York Post article, the idea that this woman at this company engaged in forced labor is as far from the truth and reality as one can comprehend. Daedone and Cherwish have been charged with forced labor conspiracy for the alleged scheme, which purportedly ran for 14 years until it ended in 2018. If convicted, they could face prison terms of 2 decades each. Daedone surrendered her passport when she turned herself in. She was instructed to stay in either New York City or Northern California, but will live in the Big Apple during her trial. The company, born in San Francisco with operations in New York, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Denver, was also the subject of this documentary that I mentioned, Orgasm, Inc. Next, I want to read from this Variety article, January 26, 2023. Sexual wellness company founder loses libel bid against BBC over podcast. The founder of sexual wellness company One Taste has failed in her bid to sue the BBC for libel over a podcast. Last March, Nicole Daedone, the co-founder and former CEO of orgasmic meditation company One Taste, applied to be party to an existing libel action against the BBC over a podcast called The Orgasm Cult. That ran in November and December of 2020. She was joined in her application by One Taste itself and Rachel Cherwitz, an orgasmic meditation practitioner. The original libel action, which continues, was filed by the Institute of OM LLC and OM IP CO, understood to be a rebranded version of One Taste, in November 2021. However, the BBC argued that Daedone, Cherwitz, and One Taste's libel claims were time-barred, falling outside of the 12-month limitation period. In a judgment handed down on Thursday, Mr. Justice Pepperell, who heard the application, said that he would not permit Daedone and One Taste to be added as parties to the libel claim because the time limit had expired and would be prejudicial to the BBC. However, he said that Cherwitz's libel claim could proceed because she was not aware of the original claim and did not make a deliberation decision in November 2021 not to join in proceedings. While the High Court has decided not to hear my defamation case, this does not in any way alleviate the BBC's responsibility to correct its errors and ensure the facts are put on record, says Daedone in a statement. I've said I find bringing defamation proceedings distasteful. Yet, despite having in its possession the true facts that unravel the false thread that holds together its podcast, the BBC has been unwilling to do its duty to ensure the public is accurately informed. Daedone has claimed that the BBC's podcast had defamed her by suggesting that she, along with One Taste and Cherwitz, had controlled a destructive sex cult which, under the false pretense of being a wellness organization promoting empowerment for modern women, deliberately manipulated and exploited vulnerable women, causing them lifelong trauma for the purpose of making themselves wealthy, according to the judgment. She also said that the podcast accused the trio of being responsible for serious criminal acts, including the repeated rape of a vulnerable young woman, sex trafficking, and facilitating and benefiting from prostitution and violations of labor law, the judgment continued. It goes on a little bit more, but wraps up with, One Taste's current CEO and Julie Ayer said, I am encouraged that Rachel Cherwitz's application for an individual libel claim has been approved. The false attack on a woman for entertainment purposes is misogynistic and should not be allowed to continue. Rachel is a courageous individual for taking on leading global broadcaster that has lost its moral compass. I'm thankful for the High Court for having currently considered our out-of-time application for a libel claim against the BBC. The same claim continues from our affiliated company, the Institute of OM.
The Frankie Files.
A little bit more to flesh out this story from Wikipedia. Nicole Daedone, founder and CEO of One Taste in San Francisco Bay Area, trademarked Orgasmic Meditation OM, procedure delivered through the company's classes. Born in Los Gatos, California, Nicole holds a bachelor's degree in gender communications from San Francisco State University. She studied with teachers of yoga and Buddhist meditation and with Ray Vetterlane, who was in turn inspired by Morehouse, a community of which Nicole was a member. One Taste has been investigated by the FBI for prostitution, sex trafficking, and violation of labor law. In June 2023, Daedone and former head of sales Rachel Cherwitz were indicted on charges of forced labor. Nicole was charged with engaging in a years-long conspiracy to manipulate victims of past sexual trauma and abuse into providing forced labor. Former members of the organization testifying about their experience at One Taste said it resembled a kind of prostitution ring, where managers frequently ordered staffers to engage in sexual relations with customers. In 2015, a former employee received a six-figure settlement for sexual assault and harassment. The company made $18 million in revenue in 2017. Nicole Daedone is known for her book, published May 2012, Slow Sex, The Art and Craft of the Female Orgasm. And I looked for more information in article form about her father, which isn't really around. Now, if you see the Netflix documentary, you'll see reference to her father being a pedophile. He's a convicted pedophile. She even makes jokes very distastefully for the One Taste, saying, I was raped and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. And basically really encourage people to desensitize themselves from any sexual trauma. And I find that so coercive and victim shaming. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that the whole time she was running her business, there's an element of women power that she was preaching as one of the cornerstones. Yet women were, by her, told it would be their enlightenment to have sex with certain men. That's not empowering to them, telling them who to have sex with. That's a sex cult. And I'm really hoping that this comes to coercion as well, some of the charges, because that is something that's already going on in the UK. They're getting more serious in personal relationships about coercion and how it can be very destructive legally, using the term coercion. My hope is that all this forced labor turns into also a federal case where it's coercion. People being lured to get a healing for their sexual situation and then turned into tricks, she was basically the pimp. In the Netflix documentary, it articulates quite in detail one woman who came because she was sexually abused, had sexual trauma, and Nicole would arrange dates for her on a local app with complete strangers. She was instructing this woman to heal herself by having sex with as many men as possible. Incredible. Really, really bad advice. Her cavalier nature, it just showed that she wasn't a healer, she's an exploiter. What's amazing is that Silicon Valley rejoiced and participated in this, thinking it's some kind of sexual liberation. And it's my understanding there's other sex cults that are teaching orgasmic meditation in the San Francisco area.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
Going to this article in 2018, shepchick.org. Headline, San Francisco's hottest cult is like Scientology, but with sex. Here in San Francisco Bay Area, we are blessed with everything: great weather, the Golden Gate Bridge, burritos, and a sex cult. The author says, that's right. I just recently learned that we have our very own sex cult. LA likes to act like they're so much cooler than us, but do they have a sex cult? Okay, yes, they do, but let's move on. This is by Rebecca Watson. She says, and this is in 2018, I can't believe I somehow missed this, but One Taste is a business sex cult that launched here in 2001. She says one of the founders was Nicole Daedone, who, in spite of founding a sex cult, or perhaps because of it, has been a featured speaker at TEDx and wrote a New York Times bestseller. The stated purpose of One Taste is to get more women to experience orgasmic pleasure, which, hey, that's a great start, and I'm down for. They started out by having events in which men would put on gloves and lube on them and make women orgasm in front of a crowd. So yeah, it got weird pretty fast, I guess. They call it orgasmic meditation, or OM, in which they tell the woman to just lie back and think of their own pleasure and not worry about any reciprocation. Yeah, I'm getting back on board. This is a comedic writer, Rebecca Watson, and she files this under religion. Unfortunately, women who got into it have a less than rosy story to tell. This week, reporter Ellen Hewitt wrote about One Taste for Bloomberg, exposing the even seedier underbelly of the cult. That's right, it gets seedier than strange men in gloves fingering women on stage until they orgasm. One ex-employee said that they were encouraged to solve all problems with sex. Have an annoying coworker you hate? Fuck them. Literally fuck them. I legitimately cannot think of a worse fate. Like, think of all the coworkers you've hated. Now think of you going to your boss and being told that you have to have sex with him. Gross. But people went along with it because cults like that thrive on appealing to sad, broken people who need help. In this case, they attracted people who had been victims of sexual abuse. All of that would be bad enough, but then you find out that they clearly took some lessons from Scientology. Like I said, they're not just a sex cult, they're also a business, and that business is based on selling classes that cost thousands of dollars and are needed for employees to move up in the organization. That means the people working for the company are actually losing money, some racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Sound familiar? Yep. It's basically Scientology with more sex. One former employee revealed that they even have priests and priestesses dressed in white, and that the company started to adapt the thought process of, we all know that this stuff is actually good, but the world isn't going to see it that way. So we're going to adapt and comply, but all the while keep the core of what we really want to do, sacred and hidden. Yep, just like the Scientologists don't talk about Xenu, and the Mormons don't talk about like half of the insane shit they're secretly into, like bigamy and all of that. In the same vein, One Taste now makes you stick around and take a few extra classes before you get to finger a lady in front of a crowd. Or be fingered. Your call. They've heard the cult label before, and one spokesperson, the head of their London office, yep, they're spreading a bad case of herpes, told Daily Beast, whenever people come together in a way that someone finds confronting, especially centered around women, the cult accusation will come up. If you add orgasm and sexuality into the mix, that lights the whole thing on fire. Sure, buddy, it's because it's centered on women, on bankrupting them, and giving them a truly fucked up idea of what sex and relationships are all about. So if you want to explore your sexuality, you'd be better off just downloading Tinder and getting to work. Find someone to rub your clit for 15 minutes. I bet if you're in a major metropolitan area, you can even find one whose fetish involves gloves and an audience. Just stay away from the scammy cults like One Taste. Rebecca is a writer and speaker and a YouTube personality, Rebecca Watson. She's hilarious. My take is that, you know, watching a sex cult be a business is so disturbing as someone who survived a sex cult too, especially. They had an explanation for everything, a line column in their accounting books for everything, and they were racking up thousands of dollars, you know, under fetish and healing and everything else. So pay attention because this story is unfolding. I'm really hoping that, as was teased in a couple of articles, which it was teased that this federal investigation will be about sex trafficking. And I'm really hoping that goes through because that's what happened. A few people at the top made all the money and people were having sex. And those with money had sex with those who didn't have money. You mean like prostitution? Thanks for listening to Frankie Files Podcast. As always, keep critical thinking. Cults, coercion, and sexuality in society. These are the topics for the Frankie Files. I'm
Frankie T's your host, and I'll continue to focus on my own family story as well as news and recovery info for those who've survived, especially the adult children of cults. New each Tuesday. See FrankieFilesPodcast.com for more.
The Frankie Files.